So, hello everybody. Thank you so much for coming out this evening to the Complete Works event, which is a partnership between the Royal Society of Literature and Speaking Volumes, two incredible organisations who do really essential work for literature. In a minute you're going to hear from Nathalie Teitler, who directed the Complete Works mentoring scheme for 10 years, and you're also going to hear from some of the poets who were on the scheme. I'm going to do a little introduction of the Complete Works, and Nathalie's going to talk about it in more depth, and I'm also going to announce a new project. So, the Complete Works was something that I thought of in about 2005, because I was very aware that poets of colour were not getting published in the UK, and we needed to do something about it. And so I went to Spread the Word, London's literature development organisation, and which I had been a director of many years before with Ruth Borthwick, who was sitting there in the audience. And I thought they were the perfect organisation to help me produce a report that would investigate why this was the case. And so together we went to the Arts Council of England, who realised that this was really serious, that poetry wasn't being represented in book form by the wider population. And so they initiated a report which discovered that under 1% of poetry books published in the UK were by writers of colour. This was really unacceptable for many obvious reasons. And so then I thought that we needed to develop some kind of mentoring scheme to try to rectify this. And that became the Complete Works mentoring scheme, which ran from 2007 to about 2017, maybe a little bit later. And 30 poets were brought onto the scheme, and they were each mentored by one of Britain's leading poets. And they were mentored for periods of 1 year or 2 years. And the whole point of the scheme was to bring these poets on. But this is not to say that they were amateurs, that they were beginners, that one or two had even published books at this point. These were very talented, brilliant poets who we felt we wanted to nurture and support to get to the next stage of their careers. And that's what we were able to do over a period of 10 years. Part of the mentoring scheme was also about networking these poets into the poetry sector. Because as many people will know, it's not just about the quality of your writing, it's about the quality of your connections. And if you're not known, if you're outside of the literature sector, then it's very hard to break through. So there were the mentoring, one-to-one mentoring relationships, but there were also writers' retreats, and there were various kind of networking events. The project was very successful. Nathalie was a phenomenal director of it, and she went above and beyond what is to be expected of somebody in her role. She was Mama Nat, and she was 1,000% dedicated to doing everything she could to support these poets. I'd also like to acknowledge Neil Astley, who is the founder and director and editor of Bloodaxe Books, because he published 4 anthologies, the latest of which is this one, Mapping the Future. So after every cohort completed their mentoring scheme, an anthology was published. Myself and Daljit Nagra edited the first anthology. Karen McCarthy-Woolf, who's sitting there, edited 2 of the anthologies, and Karen and Nathalie edited this final anthology, which is a mixture of poetry and essays and prose. And it really shows the incredible quality of these poets' work. The scheme was incredibly successful. The statistics went from under 1% to 20%, right, by 2020. And now I think it's safe to say that even though the situation isn't perfect, there are so many poets of colour out there publishing books, because there was also a ripple effect beyond the Complete Works poets. I just want to say that the poets have won many, many awards, and they continue to win many awards. They've won at least 3 Forward Prizes, 2 TS Eliot Prizes, 2 Ted Hughes Awards, the Somerset Maugham Award, Dylan Thomas Prizes, Rathbones Folio Prizes, and 3 Sunday Times Young Writer of the Year Award winners, and many, many, many more prizes. The fellows have also gone on to become editors of poetry magazines and the commissioning editors of major poetry presses at Bloomsbury and Chatto and Windus at Penguin. And they have taken on significant roles in academia and with translation projects and other literature projects. So there is a sense of a community that grew out of this scheme, which continues through to today, and it's really fantastic to be able to witness it. I'm just going to, probably for the first time, mention the names of all the poets who've been on the scheme. Raymond Antrobus, Mona Arshi, who is sitting there, second from right, Rawida Amin, Jay Bernard, Leo Box, who's sitting over there, I notice, Malika Booker, Omikemi Natasha Bryan, Victoria Adekwe Bully, Kayo Chingonyi, Rishi Dastidar, Edward Duggar, Inwa Ellams, Janet Kofi Seppo, Will Harris, who is sitting in the middle there, Sarah Howe, Ian Humphreys, Jennifer Lee Sai, Adam Lowe, Mer Mahfouz Ali, Karen McCarthy-Woolf, Nick Makoha, who's sitting next to Karen, Momtaza Mary, Eileen Punn, Roger Robinson, Shazia Kwarashi, Denise Saul, Seni Sanivaratne, Yomi Ṣode, sitting there, Degna Stone, and Warsan Shire. So when I finish, Nathalie's going to get up and talk some more about the project. I am also here to announce a new scheme that I've initiated called the RSL Scriptorium Awards. Now, scriptorium is a medieval word meaning a place to write, originally in a monastery where monks copied manuscripts. And this award will provide free writing residencies in a cottage in Ramsgate owned by myself and him and Dawes as a pension investment for the future. The residencies, for up to a month each, will offer uninterrupted time for professionally active writers to focus on their projects. This is my thinking behind this prize. Many writers don't have a dedicated writing room to themselves, and there might be financial and family demands that are challenges to completing writing projects. Some of the most important writers might not be commercially successful, but they are absolutely culturally essential and instrumental in moving the arts and society forwards. Yet literature receives the least public funding out of all the art forms, and most writers earn very little, which is no reflection on the quality of their writing. As a society, we need to build a more supportive infrastructure to help writers from every background thrive, and in so doing, keep literature in all its life-enhancing manifestations alive. I'll give you some background information about authors' earnings and statistics. So in 2022, the Authors Licensing and Collecting Society, ALCS, published its Authors' Earnings and Contracts research, which showed that authors' median earnings from writing were just £7,000 per year, and that there had been a rapid decline in the number of full-time professional authors from 40% in 2006 to 19% in 2022. Now, the RSL carried out a census of its own fellowship last year, which confirmed this, revealing that while 86% of fellows considered writing to be their primary occupation, the majority, 66%, said writing was not their main source of income. Most writers are subsidizing their income from other revenue streams, especially poets. The RSL census research also shows that the RSL's fellowship is skewed towards those living in London, who are highly educated and who come from a household where the main earner was in a professional occupation. Reflecting on these insights, the RSL Scriptorium Awards will take into consideration some of the structural barriers still facing writers at work today, and priority will be given to writers who do not have their own dedicated writing space and who experience financial barriers to completing writing projects. The awards will offer space and solitude to 10 writers a year, supporting them to sustain their living as authors. The focus is on rewarding talent. Therefore, the nature and quality of the writer's track record will be key factors in the selection process. Applications to the awards will open in spring 2025, and interested writers can then apply via the RSL's website. And just to let everybody know, I will not be on the selection committee. So that's the award. I'm now going to introduce Nathalie properly. So Dr Nathalie Teitler has worked promoting diversity in the UK in the arts for 30 years, primarily in the field of literature. She has a PhD in Latin American poetry, is an honorary fellow of the RSL, and was recently shortlisted for a Sky Arts Award. She co-founded the James Berry Prize, run by Bloodaxe Books and Newcastle University, a prize that allows poets of colour to receive mentoring and publish full collections with Bloodaxe. She is currently working to promote and develop British Latinx literature and build links with the Latin American community around the world. And as I said, Nathalie was the director of the Complete Works, and she was absolutely phenomenal. She is a tour de force, and I'm going to hand over to you now, Nathalie.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me? Yep, fantastic. This is actually really quite an emotional evening for me. The Complete Works poetry actually represents a big chunk of my life. And I've had really important conversations with every single one of the poets here. So there's so many things that are in my mind right now that I'm thinking about. You've heard a lot about the achievements of the poets, that this is probably the most successful collective ever of poetry. The prize winners, over 40 collections between them, and all these wonderful things. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about the personal side of it, what it was like for me coming into the Complete Works and what it was like over those years. So, we hear this statistic. There were less than 1% of the poets published by major presses were poets of colour. And mostly people think this is awful, but we don't really think about what that means, the reality of it. And when I came into the Complete Works, obviously as a white woman, I think I encountered some sort of backroom chats. I was privy to things that maybe not everybody was realizing I had a lot of trouble with. So I remember one of the first conversations that I had was there was a very important head of a literature organisation and a head of a Scottish library. And within that conversation, one of the first things they said was, oh, but black and brown poets don't publish collections. And I said, okay, this is really not good. And I actually spent, I think, the first sort of 5 years of the Complete Works constantly enraged and having to try and be pleasant, because a lot of it was about changing opinions. And I don't think changing opinions by yelling at people is, well, it's tempting. It's very, very tempting. I'm not convinced that it works. So, those were some of the early experiences. I remember that the first tutor who came in, who I had selected, was very, very well-known and esteemed British poet, came into the first round. So Nick and Karen, who were both on the first round, will remember this. And she decided to talk about how wonderful the British Empire was. Which was, I was kind of like doing, No, absolute kind of, there was really quite a lot of tone deafness as well. So I think a lot about the poets who came in on that first round and how for them it was a real act of faith because they had no idea what they were coming into. They had no idea if the people running the program were going to be of that kind of mindset or if they were going to be given a real chance. And I will always be thankful to them for their bravery, honestly, because they're the ones who made it possible for the later rounds to have faith and for the whole program to succeed. It did get slightly better. By the second round, I think people were a little bit more aware, or at least maybe more careful around me. I do remember there was a very famous editor who's a poet of a London magazine, big journal, and he came in to do a talk, and one of the poets of the second round quite rightly asked, why don't you have more black and brown poets in your journal? You know, it's a very important journal. And he, without blinking, said, oh, I really don't want to dumb down for my readers. And the poet who asked quite rightly walked out. In retrospect, it's one of the biggest regrets of mine that I didn't ask him to leave at that point, because that was wildly, wildly unacceptable. So I think, you know, it's about understanding what the poets were dealing with and what it really was like, because if that's what it was like for me, you can begin to understand what kind of things the poets themselves were up against. So I really wanted to talk about that and then reframe the fact all of their successes against that. You know, that they have managed to have over 40 collections, win every meaningful prize, have international careers, and become the editors of the journals that they were once turned away from. This is incredible. You know, this is a huge change in the landscape, and it required enormous courage from all 30 of them. I also wanted to thank Bloodaxe Press and Neil Astley because, and I've often thought about this, Neil agreed that Bloodaxe would publish an anthology of the first round of poets, having absolutely no idea who those poets would be. And I think that's such an act of faith, and I really can't think of any other editor and publishing house that would have done that. So, you know, I really think we need to be grateful to Neil, who then went on, of course, to publish the next anthologies and the wonderful Mapping the Future. But honestly, that support from a major publishing house is one of the things that made the complete works viable. You know, it's one of the reasons that people took it seriously. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that, so you know we can really understand what a journey the poets went on and why it was such a journey for me. Because a lot of the time it wasn't about me trying to make the poets better, they were already extraordinary. It was just giving them confidence. It was getting them into the rooms so that they could be heard. It was talking to people who should have known better, and making them slightly reframe their way of looking at poetry. I'd love to say that the whole solution, you know, everything is solved now and it's all great. And obviously the statistics look healthy, the poets have done incredibly well, they could not have done better. But we have seen some recent discussions in the literature world which were not very edifying. And I'm not going to name names because we're in the British Library and I am mindful and demure, but if you catch me after the event, I will tell you all the names of everybody that I've mentioned, seriously, with joy. But I saw an article in the bookseller not very long ago where this woman had written about an ongoing debate within literature, and she basically said, as everyone knows, I mean, this was literally her words, as everyone knows, diversity and quality are opposing forces. And the bookseller didn't question it. Nobody questioned it. I wrote to them and said, was this not something that flagged up a problem? And I think that's what we are dealing with now. There is still this idea that if poets of colour and writers of colour, artists of colour are succeeding, it's because of diversity measures. and it will eventually come to an end. That seems to be the view. Oh, if we just wait it out, they will be gone. Which again is highly problematic. And I really, really want to question that. And also to say that my personal motivation with the complete works has been because I so strongly believe that diversity and quality go together. That we are living in a multicultural environment, that we are living in a publishing world in which writers from countries all over the world and other cultures are selling so well. This is what audiences want. This is what they need. This is what makes you see the world in new ways. And you cannot ask more of art and artists than that, to make you part of a global economy, to make you a slightly different, bigger person. So that's really what the Complete Works poets did for me. I think that's what they do for all of their readers and the people listening to them. Please do buy the book because it is extraordinary with essays and poetry. We're about to hear from them. So I just wanted, before I introduce the first poet, to thank Bloodaxe again, to thank Speaking Volumes for making this beautiful event, the RSL, the British Library. I think I've got everybody. So, huge thanks as always. And I am delighted to introduce the first poet of the evening, Will Harris. And on a personal note, I would just like to say that Will is one of the nicest, most delightful people I have ever met. On the literature retreat, because he was on the third round, he was locked out of the building due to a series of unfortunate incidents. Again, I will name no names, but if you catch me later, I will tell you. And he was so lovely about it. He just said, oh, no, it's not a problem. It's not a problem. I slept on a couch. Now, Will is a tall man, so his legs did not fit on the couch, and he never complained. So I've always been, and my mother adores him. Truly, she always asks, how is Will? So there we go. Will is a London-based poet. Well, actually, at the moment, I think he's Paris-based because he's doing a fellowship at the Institute of Ideas and Imagination at Reed Hall in Paris. But prior to that, he was a London-based poet of Indonesian and Chinese heritage. His first collection, Rendang, which is absolutely stunning, won the Forward First Collection Prize. Unfortunately, it was during COVID, so I think, Will, you missed out on a lot of the sort of the fireworks and the fanfare and all the good things that he should have had. Brother Poem, the second book, was a huge international success. Will has also written a long essay, which I think the New York Times raved about, and I've forgotten the title of it, my mind's gone completely blank, but it is absolutely brilliant. So, Will, if you would like to come up.
It's really nice to be here. Thank you, Nathalie. Thank you, Bernardine. And yeah, I mean, I'm not going to repeat all the thanks, but thank you ad infinitum. Yeah, maybe I'm going to read two poems, and then maybe I'll briefly have a brief period of reflection between them. Okay. This first poem I wrote in when Donald Trump was president, just an unthinkably distant time, and there was a person who was quite prominent then called Richard Spencer, who's kind of fallen completely off the radar. I haven't even Googled what he's doing now. He was a prominent neo-Nazi, and I wrote this poem just when I was traveling between. I was tutoring a lot, and I was just on the train, and I just thought I would imagine the most kind of radical anti-fascist act I could think of was to imagine a series of essentially quite sexy dreams that he was having. I mean, not all of them live up to it. They're just tender, I would say, very tender dreams. This is called 7 Dreams of Richard Spencer. And I think you could replace Richard Spencer with whoever you want, whatever enemy you have. 1. Once I woke up with the actual gilded horns of a cuck, and you admired them and assured me I need not fear dreams that pass through the horned gates. But then I turned into a yellow cowfish, flopping on the bed, and you picked me up by my small horns and flushed me down the toilet. 2. Once I believed myself to be a cuckoo, when in fact I was a pair of binoculars looking at a cuckoo. I hung around your neck, swaying on the drive home, where you left me on the seat. There I turned into a mote of dust. The next day, you sat in silence, the churring call of a nightjar outside, while I nested in your eye. 3. Once I was a cucumber and you pretended I was useful, but when I said I was a Gurkha, speaking German fluently, you tried to pickle me. I remember wanting to turn into a kitten or something cute, but ended up as a novelty keychain for a real estate broker called Big Dicks. 4. Once I was the chlorine in a public swimming pool and I flowed into the open gills of a woman I believed to be my mother before it occurred to me that my mother isn't young and doesn't have gills. I turned into a macrophage and was able to see that the woman I believed to be my mother was addled with cancer. So I started to eat my way through every cell I came across, not because I wanted to save her, but because it tasted good. 5. Once Europe was a market square, and though it wasn't market day, I'd come to sit and drink hot chocolate and listen to the buskers, one of whom was singing Schumann's Dichterliebe, which for some reason you thought was bleeding love. It's not, I said, but later I heard Leona Lewis's voice and the flapping of the pigeons outside the National Museum. The exhibits on loan had been replaced by photographs. Each time I tried to touch one, it moved. You better back the fuck off, said the security guard. I turned into a boy and girl who had lost their parents, and we hugged each other, crying. 6. Once the rain fell in vertical girders, and I thought I could walk between them, pressing my cheek against their cold surface. But a mansion rose about me several floors high, and a voice called, telling me to leave. Father, I said, why have you forsaken me? I turned into a great eyeball, and still he looked away. So I turned into a frog and slipped without a sound into a mill pond. 7. Once I was not myself or another man or either of their lips exactly, but the expression of a kiss they shared. And at first, I have to say, it was beautiful. But then I felt myself turning into, or no, recognizing myself as a desert flower, which was even better. Okay, my brief unscripted reflection. All right, where do I start? I hadn't really written any poems when I became part of the Complete Works, and I think like a lot of young writers, I thought it was going to provide a lot of answers. And I think, if I'm honest, my first response to it was like disappointment. I was just like, oh, this is just a group of people, and nothing has really changed in my life. I think that's often the experience of like literary milestones. You know, you think everything's going to change, and it doesn't. And it took me a long time, I think. Maybe it was only after it ended, or the year after, when I realized the kind of shift it entailed inside of me. And the main one is that I'd never really shared my work with people. I never shared my work with people who had similar backgrounds to me. And that changed everything in my writing. Because I think the challenge of diversity, the reason it's a threat, or the reason it should be a threat, is that it's not just about changing the faces at the table, but because it does threaten the orthodoxy. And that I think the spirit of collectives like this is meant to be radical. It's meant to be a threat to authority. And that's something I've thought a lot about. Like, what does it mean to be someone who has my experience, our experience at this moment in time? And I'm constantly reminded, talking to people who have similar different experiences, talking to a Lebanese friend, and a lot of her family is in South Beirut, the area which is being bombed right now, to complete ruins. And she tries to justify how she can live outside of Beirut when all her family is there. And she says that she teaches, and at the beginning of every class she reminds all of her students that they're at war, that they might not feel it themselves, but their country is at war. And that's something I felt with what's happening in the Middle East, it's made me think a lot about my family and my mum's experience of genocide in Indonesia in the 60s and in the 90s, and the kind of differential burden that falls on people with family from the global south to bear witness to that for people who feel insulated from what's happening, and to remind others that, you know, if you're a writer right now, you are essentially a war writer, and that you may not have a direct experience of genocide, but you're, you know, a very narrow, slender little slip of distance away from someone who is. And in that spirit, I'm going to read something which is completely unrelated. But maybe not completely unrelated. For the last... for 2.5 years, up until quite recently, I was working in care homes in Tower Hamlets. And a lot of that work involved making tea. I got really good at making tea, because people can be very critical of tea making, as I discovered. And that is the only information you need for this poem. It's called Speaky Stonehenge. I was thinking about it last week as I was helping Kath to her seat, that Stonehenge is stitched into the English national psyche, but genomic research published in 2018 suggests the Neolithic people who constructed Stonehenge and their descendants who carried the memory of its use were replaced by Beaker people from Central Europe and Iberia over 4,000 years ago. I was thinking this alters the relationship between Stonehenge and its visitors. Though white English tourists might see themselves as communing with their ancestors at Stonehenge, it could be described, or it could be said, that foreign tourists encounter it in a way more closely resembling that of Britain's ancestors, as bizarre objects out of time and space. I was thinking this as I was helping Kath to her seat. It's standard to refer to Bronze Age cultures by their styles of pottery, like bell beakers or corded ware. The Beaker people are defined by the vessels they used. An analogy could be drawn with language use. Focus on the speaker ignores the extent to which language, a kind of vessel, speaks through us. I was thinking about this as I was helping Kath to her seat, and Frank shouted across the room at me. He wanted a cup of tea. "Speaky English," he shouted. At first, I misheard him. I thought he was maybe using speaky in a sense that was new to me, indicating a counterpart to the speaker. In my head, Frank was asking me if I was not so much a speaker of English, in control of my language, as a speakee, someone to whom the language, English, only flowed through. I was thinking this as I helped Kath to her seat. I remembered meeting Gary 4 years ago. He was an administrator at English Heritage, and he told me that a month after his mum died, he'd gone to Stonehenge. He stepped over the ropes and stood in the middle of the stone circle, at which point he realized that it was a monument to our ancestors. He was crying as he said this, so I didn't mention the Beaker people. He paused at the word "our" and looked at me. It could have been the association with his mum, the private "our" he'd lost, but that look seemed to suggest a public "our," which excluded me. "I felt that," he said. I was thinking about this last week as I helped Kath to her seat and Frank shouted across the room. I thought of Stonehenge. The speaker stands inside the monument, unable to experience it. Instead, the monument speaks through them. They are the speakee. And now I have the honor of introducing Yomi Ṣode, who is an award-winning Nigerian-British writer whose debut collection, Mannerism, was shortlisted for the Rathbones Folio Prize in 2023 and the TS Eliot Prize 2022. Yomi is a Complete Works alumnus and a member of Malika's Poetry Kitchen. He's the founder of Boxed In, First Five, The Daddy Diaries, and the mentorship program 12 and 12. And yeah, he's also a great guy.
Evening. Everyone all right? Yeah. You sure? Yeah. It's Friday. Is everyone all right? Yeah. Wicked. You know, it's all poetry. You never know how to kind of deal with these things, you know what I mean? But we're still a vibe, you know? It's an absolute honor to be reading this evening. Fun fact, I actually submitted for Complete Works the second round, and I didn't make it in. And I said, "Oh, these lot don't know poetry, man. Like, what is this? Like, no." I was so frustrated. I was so annoyed. And I remember emailing Natalie at the time, and it was a thing about just keeping in touch. And for the next year, I was just in every course. I was just like kind of learning about this, learning about that, and working on it. And then when it came round for Complete Works 3 and I submitted, and thankfully I made it in, I read back at the poems I submitted for 2, and I was like, yeah, I kind of get why now. I kind of get it. You know, there's a real, I'm going to get into the poems, I'm really bad at preambles, and I think what I'm thankful about is an opportunity where there's a type of lived experience in which I'm going to share with you in these poems that the program makes room for, that I've noticed, especially in the lead up to the publication of Mannerism, that with certain publishing houses, they were still quite uncomfortable in how to deal with it. So I'm going to start. I'm going to read from here. So I arrived in England when I was 9. I was born in Nigeria. And my mum was, this is to my mum, and my mum at that time was just trying to make it right. You know, I don't necessarily know about everyone's mums in here, but she was, and parents, but she was just trying to make it as right as possible, even in school. Even when the teacher's done some wrong, she still addressed me like I was the one in the wrong. Not because she wanted to be mean, but just because she just wanted us to just mess up in anything. But now that she's a grandma, things are different. And I'm just like, what? I needed you back then. What happened? So this is just a bit of a reflection on that. 12:05 in North London, thinking about Kingsley Smith. My mother made me wear steel-plated boots for my first day in school. She painted black on each boot, black on black like a blessing. With pride, she enrolled the name Yomi, something unfamiliar to my tongue. She's never heard African boo-boo scratcher or you afs. My mother never heard the mocking. Bullies also wore suits, though she never heard their you won't amount to anything chatter. She beat me bad, beat me scared, beat me sorry. She beat me for being rude to the teachers. How dare I speak of wrongdoing when they have my best interest at heart? My mother worked twice as hard in England. Her profession in Nigeria meant little on the paper is written on here. She now cares for the elderly, white people, who in the past refused the help of a black woman, then purposely shat on the floor for her to wipe. She would call me most Christmas nights from work, seeing if I was okay, maybe as a comfort for herself. Also, the thought that one day this will all be worth it. My mother, now a grandmother, has yet to be offered a suit. She wonders why. Her kindness, did it ever mean anything? She hears the language used towards her grandson now. What? What do they mean, assessment and disruptive? Liars! Liars! Junior, you can try and try and try and try even more, but they will still look through you like you don't exist. Or for you to bleed until you can even take yourself seriously. My mother tells me to tell the bullies in suits to leave him alone. Or she will come to the school and deal with each of them one by one. Proudly, I watch my mother, slowly feeling the muscles in her face squeeze as it turns into a bittersweet stare. It just dawned on me that the next 2 poems were actually written via writing residency, which shall be unnamed, but was tutored by Mona Arshi and Mimi Kavati, who are just incredible people. This first poem was an incident that took place. A sestina for the curious Oyibo. This lady, drunk or too familiar, decided tonight was the moment to ask, do you want to be white? Yeah. My watch reads 2:30. I'm on a retreat trying to write, but brought short by behaviors turned bold in the dark. I laugh, suppressing my anger. Are you being serious? Her stare, a rifle dotting my head with intention. Her back is straight, she grips the table through the tension, hammering her words in as though to ignite my ira, to flush the real me out. Ridiculous. What is this? A test? I hold my anger in, remain polite. I'm struck by her slyness, like I don't feel my noir in the room most mornings when I sit down to write. Fucking with white men's forms, writing out their rights. She probes my guzzle as though I'm a fluke. The notion of my writing the better poem. How foolish at this dark hour to have even thought she could rein in her envy and spite. I can't believe you asked me that. To which she says, I know I'm white, I know. Slavery ended years ago. It shouldn't be my burden. Jesus. Emotions already strained. I give a serious yet measured response to this lady. I'm thinking I just want to write. Not explain myself to every Oyinbo in sight. My watch reads 2:47 and I am tired. This lady's intention has little to do with my poem and more with easing her plight, her denial and ignorance set loose from the dark. Her closet encounter with a man who looks like me, Alawo Igi, as bark. Too close for a closed mind, her fall, the fall of Icarus. She shouts to offset my refusal to react. This isn't my fight. I'm ignoring the tearful implicit demand that I check to see if she is all right. You think it's racist to ask? I have mixed race children. My question is not meant to offend. Now you're making me feel bad. I can't help being white. And there, right there, I watch as this Oyinbo stares herself towards the light, to clarity and fire. I know this dark feeling, this doo-doo, expected to speak about trauma with ease. Her sincere invitation to talk, she says, has gone wrong. How did it get so serious? My watch reads 3:25. I pause my rewrite while this lady gets done with sucking man's blood, a parasite, firing projections, spurious, all her whiteness emerging from the dark. I say good night. I leave with all my body, my black ara, infinite. Thank you. Everyone all right? 2 more and I'm out of your hair because this clock thing ain't playing no games in front of me right now. I heard the laughter, I heard the applause, but now I need some participation from you all. You ready? Yeah. So this poem is titled Insert Name, Mother, a Ghazal. So the word is just song. So on the count of 3, can we all say song? 1, 2, 3. Song. Oh. Again, 1, 2, 3. Song. Also, you're like, song, what? Bring it. Do you know what I mean? Wicked. Nah, let's go. Sing me something. A sun rising above a tower block. A song. No, wait. A sun rising above a tower block. Wait. A song. On mornings, watching him stretch before my eyes, a magical song. Day 7, my body now numb has turned its back on me. If this is morning, I want his spirit here to sing us a farewell song. Pastor, how dost thou forgive? Each exhale stains this house. I am sinning in my grief. Congregation, bless me a song. So much food left untouched that will rot. Here, nothing is staying. My boy is on the news. His face at graduation when we sang a song. Earlier years, each step was like water crashing on rocks. We watched him grow, 2 stepping the ghouls away in song. Hold me. Stay as if it were summer, where love was our biggest risk. Lover, permit me a night to be willing to arc my back in. Policeman, though I speak, I cannot hear myself. No, he was never in a gang. Listen to me, please, you stubborn. The fridge, it hums sadness. The light is faulty. The silence is unbearable. House, perhaps some meaning lies in all of this. Some. No, baby, wait, no. He didn't leave you because you finished the jam. No, listen. Lightning struck an upshot of beanstalk to the heavens, a distracting song. The spirit never dies. And every day I search, and I can't feel him. Can he hear me, Yomi? Crying, praying, singing him a song. Cool, I think. I feel like, is that me time-wise? Yeah. Wicked, that is me time-wise, awesome sauce. Awesome, thank you very, very much. It's an incredible evening. So now I would like to introduce the one and only Mona Arshi. Mona is a poet, novelist, and essayist. Mona trained as a human rights lawyer at Liberty before she started writing poetry. Her debut collection, Small Hands, won the 2015 Forward Prize for Best First Collection. She's also the author of poetry collection Dear Big Gods and a Goldsmith shortlisted novel, Somebody Loves You. She was a writer in residence at Trinity, Cambridge, and Mouth. Her third collection of poetry will be published next year by Chattel Penguin Books. Make some noise for Mona Arshi.
Hi everyone. According to the clock, I've got 1 minute. I can still have 10 minutes, right? Yeah. Thank you, Yomi. I remember that retreat. It scarred. It was a very strange week, but the guzzle was amazing. Thank you. Thank you, Bernardine and Natalie. I feel really proud of being part of this family. I'm going to read new poems, and I haven't read for a long time, actually. I've sort of been in a writing cave for the last 2 years. So I'm going to, and it's really interesting because I think it's really important to have, I think the poem isn't finished actually until it hits the air and has an audience. So this is sort of an experiment. There's a poem that I'd like to read to you, and it's called Do No Harm / I Dream of Goat. And I've been thinking quite a lot about how we can live in a light-footed way on the planet. How can we live with not doing any further harm to the world around us? And one of the reasons I came to this was that I came across a community called the Khasi tribe, and they are based in northeastern part of India, and one of their kind of philosophies is that they are committed to doing no harm to any living thing. But once a woman is pregnant in the tribe, she can eat nothing apart from vegetables and eat no meat, but also the family have to be committed to that as well. And I just thought, my goodness, how would you do it? So this is Do No Harm / I Dream of Goat. I haven't killed a single thing in months, and hand on heart, it's getting tiresome. I take soft steps in my rooms. Delicately, I scoop the scorpion out from under its chair. The fire ants feast on the soft of my thigh, and I resist flattening them with my nails. I haven't harmed a living thing apart from in my dreams. I greet the salamanders with a bow and smile, showing my teeth. No offense, no offense. My axe, it grows dusty. Meanwhile, I dream of goat. In the field of my dreams, I am butchering the ancient woods, stoppering the rivers and suffocating the flame-pink brain coral. I've taken to a breakfast of warm eggs from the nests. The black snakes tremble when I'm close, and I eat until I'm full of goat. Then awake in a fervor on my thin mattress, the dream curtain still fluttering, half in, half out of the killings. The priest determines that dreaming is not cheating as we count my miserable sins. How harmless can we really be? Patience, blessed woman, soon you'll cradle your innocent son on the untried cathedral steps. Okay, so the next... I feel like saying to you that some of the work I'm going to be reading has got some dark themes in it, but that's inevitable. So my next book, Mouth, is out next year, and it's really curious about the Iliad and the Greek plays, including Antigone. And I just want to say a little bit about why a poet would be interested in these texts, which are over 2,000 years old. And I mean, I sort of went to them because I was desperate to find meaning in where we are now, and it would be odd to say that I went to these ancient texts, but you can see these texts in two ways. You can either see them as inert, ancient relics which live there, or you can see them, and I see them in this other category, which is like ancient standing stones, where you have to sort of touch them occasionally because they have witnessed war, horror, post-war trauma, and these really complex moral dilemmas that we face still. So, but what they don't do is they don't center women, and that was what really interested me. It was just, these are deeply patriarchal texts, and women are mostly absent, and so things are done to them. They're never really given voice. And so that's one of the things I've been trying to do, is trying to make these women, give them air, give them agency, give them stories, give them character. And so one of these is a poem from the Iliad, and it's from the mouth of Chryseis. And Chryseis was a prize of Agamemnon. If you look up Agamemnon, you know he was not a nice guy. He murdered his daughter Ephinegia, and he took a prize in the war, a slave girl who was a daughter of a prophet. And we sort of don't hear anything about her apart from the fact that she sort of was handed back eventually. And I wanted to voice her. So this is from the mouth of Chryseis, War Prize for Agamemnon. During the first war in my infancy, the women wanted to brand me. Children become displaced, they said. They need their father's mark on their body. My father, the holiest man, of course, forbade it. I was special. Of all the people in the kingdom, why would a prophet's daughter need a signature? In the war I was taken, a prize thrown to a man who smelt of his daughter's ghost litter. Guilt through his pores, I clawed at my arms, I bit my fists. Every morning I wanted to voice something, but no shape was made from my boneless tongue. I screamed inside that violet patch, deep in the center of my belly. During that long war, there was blood on the beaks of wrens. There was nothing to kill for anymore. There was nothing to pray for. I have my own son now, born from that time. I have not named him. He does not know what he is yet. In between my breaths, I watch him. Look, he is toying with the worms, his fierce eyes bright as studs. Through the temple smoke, I observe his perfect toes in the dust, unbranded and open to the elements. Unbranded and open to the elements, his perfect toes in the dust. Through the temple smoke, I observe his fierce eyes, bright as studs. Look, he is toying with the worms. In between my breaths, I watch him. He does not know what he is yet. I have not named him. I have my own son now, born from that time. Nothing to pray for, to kill for anymore. There was nothing on the beaks of wrens. During that long war, there was blood in the center of my belly. I screamed inside that violet patch, but no shape was made from my boneless tongue. Every morning I wanted to voice something. I clawed at my arms, I bit my fists. Ghost litter, guilt through his pores, thrown to a man who smelt of his daughter. In the war, I was taken, a prize. Why would a prophet's daughter need a signature? Of all the people in the kingdom, I was special. My father, the holiest man, of course, forbade it. I had no need of father's mark on my body. Children become displaced, they said. The women wanted to brand me during the First War in my infancy. I'm going to tighten the screw a tiny bit more because I wrote a poem. Actually, I've been thinking quite a lot because I used to be a human rights lawyer, and now obviously I wrote poems, and lots of people ask me how you have gone from like one of the socially useful occupations to something which is sort of very ambiguous. And I've been thinking about it quite a lot, and this poem, I think, sort of revealed that conflict, because I was asked by the Robert Kennedy Foundation a couple of years ago to write something around a UN convention. I chose genocide, and I wanted to write about the Yazidi women, and actually I felt that I was asking quite a lot of questions about what a poem was able to do and what the role of a poet was and how you respond in language to atrocity, actually. And so also I think because it's almost the 10th anniversary of the Yazidi genocide, what's happened to history is very interesting, because a lot of that history has been sort of, embellished. A lot of the communities, for very good reasons, have rewritten that history. But I wanted this poem to sort of put a stake in the ground because things happened. And so this is where this comes from. It's called Mute Mountains. In the skies over Mosul, the poem twitches into being. It flickers its orange tail, flames, echoes in the valleys. The valleys will absorb the aftersound. Here are the compound eyes and the heads of the poppies. Here is a girl who refuses to look in the wind. Now she is bone breath and ashes. This is where the poem begins. The fringes of the poem dare to lie back across the dust in straight lines. What can a poem do when it meets the so what bird of the mountain, a bird that will only drink water on the wing? They say, have you seen the bodies? I say yes. Imagine not being able to imagine, you say. This poem has such tender hooves, but it can't follow the women into the tents, through the pockets of men, or touch your hair. It rests now on its receiver. Here it is, in my throat, sorrowing, as I cut the air with my hands. I'm going to read one last poem, and I wanted to end this reading with the word sunshine. So I was very deeply committed to that. So this is called The Logic of Broken Things. Proust talked about gathering up all the broken things about you. I like this. I like the idea of a human magnet letting all the broken things pile on, layer upon layer. Half-forgotten hymns and all the grazes and fractured ancient skillets. Broken things implies the things we almost did. Unfinished barefoot walks, the python I moved to touch but hesitated. Too late. We could include the broken gate of a line of verse, all the abstracts they told me to stay away from, grief, love, loss, pointillist shatterings. Should we add the half-mothered things? Once I ran away from a boy from the Sundarbans with incense on his palms. That's too sad to think of now. Those fine particles will settle on my body, but I wouldn't want to brush them off. Imagine a world where nothing gets broken, all the things we could overlook. I wouldn't want to be without the doors I left ajar, coils of regret in smoke-filled bars. I could lie very quietly in a room and watch them all float down like dust, the splinterhertz circling like those tiny maddening flies in the impossibly bright sunshine. Thank you so much, and it gives me a great pleasure to introduce you to the next poet, Nick Makoha, who writing I've admired for many years. Nick is Malika's Kitchen Fellow. His debut poetry book, Kingdom of Gravity, was shortlisted for the 2017 Felix Dennis Prize for Best First Collection. He won the 2015 Brunel International African Poetry Prize and is the founder of the Obsidian Foundation, a retreat for Black poets of African descent. His latest collection will be published by Penguin next year.
I've been crying over there. I don't know why. I have some inkling. The first is to say thank you to Natalie and Bernardine because I'm a black body. And even though one of the easiest things to see is black, a lot of times I pass through the world and I'm invisible or I'm a threat. And those two women, and many other people in this room, but those two women particularly, and we can vouch for this, they see us. And I can vouch specifically for the two women in times when I've been in danger or felt unsafe. They've come at a phone call immediately. And one of them is a Booker Prize winner who's got better things to do than to talk to a black man about what's going on in his life. But usually she's the first one to come even before my family. So I really want to say, on behalf of everyone on Complete Works, we love you and thank you. Yeah. I'm going to read you 4 poems from my new collection called The Kingdom of Gravity. Oh, not Kingdom of Gravity, called The New Carthaginians. It still connects. Just so that you understand, I was actually here at the British Library when they had Leonardo da Vinci's Codex. And at that time, I was thinking about starting a new collection. And the theory I had in my mind is, what if a poet could put all their knowledge into one poem? That was the idea. What it's morphed into is this new thing called the New Carthaginians, where the Carthaginians are myself, the painter Jean-Michel Basquiat, and a black Icarus. And I'm using them as personas in which to narrate my life, which I'm trying to understand, because I realize I might not have even been a poet if I didn't leave my country. And the only reason I left my country, as many of you are talking about, is that my country was at war, and it was, and if I hadn't left my country, maybe I didn't need this language, of which at one time I knew 4 languages, but I needed poetry to express myself in a country that doesn't see me, or even in my own country where they no longer see me as one of them. So that was the thinking behind it. So I'm going to read you these 4 poems, and the first poem is actually called The Codex. It belongs to a series of poems called The Codex. Codex. When my father lost his job, it was a way to make the other thing a beginning. The sit-ins and the marches with helicopters twitching at 24 frames a second. My father had been many things, not just a face behind a thought traveling through the free world. Once, he was a glass mountain. Once, he was a catastrophe separating day from night. Once, when we were at the edge of town and he could no longer keep the silence, he used the same face he spoke with to cry. I had a small non-speaking part. So many of the themes of the book look at what I call flight. This poem I'm reading you is right at the beginning of the collection. It looks at different types of flight. Of course, the flight of Icarus, but also me having to leave my country as flights, as a person in exile. And it's probably one of my favorite poems. Flight. 1. Flight, There are things that can never be the same, like the history of space. 2 a.m., that is the actual moment when Basquiat and I first met. In the light of that moment, he begins to talk about doing something other than art. Writing, perhaps? I take his cup of coffee and cup it in one hand as he draws a pair of wings on the back of a napkin. Why wings, I ask? Because the body is an imperfect container. 2, flight. Time is what stops everything happening at once. I remember Icarus, Iverson's 48-point game, the taste of sorrel on a beach. But I've forgotten the fear of flying, and I wake from a deep sleep conscious that I am an animal, a bird on fire looking for an edge. For the 3rd time in my life, I am scissoring through darkness. The night is thick with everything coming. Swift is the night, slow is its dark. 3, flights, fleeing. Think of it like this. Amelia, the flight attendant, will want to know if everyone is okay. My face, framed in the mirror of an Airbus bathroom, lacks courage. A gun in a paper bag, and all things fear you and tremble in your presence. As my life has taught me, we must suffer. Without this world, I will take myself and unhinge myself from this body. Now, keep in mind, this section is translated. 4, flight, between floors and levels. Now, I didn't choose the location, 0.0436 degrees north, 32.4418 degrees east in its darkness and hunger. Neither did I choose the ceiling of stars that made me a foreigner that evening, in the same way that the air becomes something else the moment we lean into it, waiting to bear us up as we glide upon it. Then I, too, am a new thing, born of another language. I am both familiar and unfamiliar. 5, flight, a selection of small potions. This photo is taken towards the end of the shoot. It is a love movement. If you add the captions of the sound of the rain pounding, you can hear my father ask the cameraman, will the light displace us? Stevie Wonder is playing. I'm off camera. And at 3 years old, I already know that they are going to split up. That Uganda skyline looks completely different now. 6, flight, a far-fetched idea. Who understands the world? The year is 1976. It will be a long summer. Air France Flight 139 will depart from Tel Aviv. So far, no sign of blood. The future, what does it know? We're in the last stages of waiting. A German will ask for the freedom of 40 Palestinians detained in Israel. They are moving to a changed destination, a foreign city that houses the room in which I was born. 7, flight, the tale. Do you know this one? I call it Icarus's theme tune. He flies away like a dream. They cannot find him. Even like a vision of the night, he is chased away. Job, chapter 20, verse 8. Does anyone have a tissue? My nose is running, and I cannot read the next poem for my embarrassment. What? Hold tight, hold tight. It's Linton. Wah, my G. No, I'll take Linton. No! I don't need to do no more readings. Linton gave me a tea. Whoa. Yo, don't touch this, bro. Don't touch that. What? Sorry, I apologize for that, Leo. But that was Linton. You don't understand, man. That's like Michael Jordan saying, would you like to play with my ball? You know what I mean? Anywho. Okay. All right. Linton, I love you, man. For that alone, you're a G. You're a straight G. All right, so let me compose myself. I want to acknowledge 2 poets who have passed. One is Bayega, and while I was doing my PhD, he was also doing his, and he lost his life in circumstances that he shouldn't have, and he is definitely one of us. And the other is Fiona Leslie, and these are people who, in the poetry world, when you see a shining light, they encourage you. So I just want to acknowledge them. And that's probably why, yesterday was Fiona's memorial. That's probably why I'm caught in my emotions. So I do apologize for that. But I don't know why now I've chosen to cry, but that is what is going on for me. So I'll read you 2 more poems and I will try and compose myself. So this poem I'm going to read you now is called Equals Pi, and it's based after a painting that Basquiat has done. And all you need to know, I'm doing this thing, it's ekphrasis, but what I call it double ekphrasis. So going back with the tears, when the Boom for Real exhibition was here by Basquiat, when I saw, the first time I ever saw a Basquiat painting, I burst into tears in the same way I'm embarrassing myself right now. And what I had to do, I actually went around America looking at paintings of Basquiat to find out what that feeling was. And basically what I realized about Basquiat is that he has a codex for centering the black body and placing it in history and placing all of history onto one page. He actually said in an interview, I wanted to place all of history onto one page, which is kind of similar to what I told you I was trying to do with the codex. So when I saw that, it was like through the painting, I was seeing a way to express myself. Does that make sense? So anyway, this is called Equals Pi. There are 3 of us paddle up in our kayaks to Pemgru Island. Before the 3rd morning, the future separates into sea and sky. In the fractured extension of broken time, everything depends on how you interpret it, just as a prayer is more than the order of its words. Take that corner of the sky. Notice how the brightness of a gleaming sun retreats from the world. The journey picks up in Stone Town, where all our food and drinks are catered. A lone fisherman beckons us to the far side of the beach. In the brief history of his silence, we set up camp for the night as the fisherman tends to our fire under the boab trees. I fall asleep to the flame. What if the spaces we use for testimony are equal to pi? Here's a burning bush. Moses was a fugitive who saw the whole of Egypt's harvest destroyed. He stood against a troop of magicians and had to believe that the God who called him from the flames of a burning thicket would terraform his reality. In the brief history of this other silence, he was talking to God in the same way that I'm talking to you. What theater to catch God mid-sentence? I wonder, does he stress his T's? I wonder if when Kanye burns his childhood home to rubble on the stage, is he really drawing a line, a parallel, of a burnt city that equals to pi? What if the burning bush was God's cover blown? Or what if the flames were God's primer and the flame's crackle was the soundscape he embodied while he was awaiting another voice, the kind of voice that you might hear coming out of the drum kit of Max Roach while he's recording Money Jungle in the now, and by now, I mean today, is equal to pi. The pistol of a dead man is equal to pi. The year 1976 is equal to pi. Entebbe Airport, with its floor on fire, is equal to pi. The opening scene of Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing will, if you allow it, have you standing on the sofa's edge for the 90 minutes, and the dance that your heart makes in the closing credits is equal to pi. So are the number of times you watch it again as if it was the first time. The world trying to reset itself is equal to pi. As is the burden that arouses men to labor. That too is equal to pi. Don't you notice a pattern? Okay. Don't focus on the spine, but what it holds up. The future is an eroding witness, and she will tell you that war is not about protecting the border, but how much blood is spilt within it. Tragedy belongs to such whispers. The bodies of your friends in a morgue are equal to pi, and whatever flame is burning. Fame in a world like this is worthless. That too is equal to pi. My country is a woman in heat, a bridge of lusts, mercenaries crosser, applauded by the massing sands, Adonis. Thank you for your time. I've just got one more for you, and complete works, even though it's coming to an end, I hope we continue the work that these 2 ladies have fought for us, and that we are having great conversations like this in the future. Okay, I'm just looking for the poem, bear with me. I'll read this one, okay. So I wrote this one on a retreat. It was online, it was during COVID, Hollywood Africans, and it was one of those poems. When I wrote this, I was like, I know what the book could be. if that makes sense. So, because I was trying to get all the characters together, so Icarus, Basquiat, and myself. And it's kind of a semi-true version. Well, it's not exactly true, but my wife doesn't like me writing love poems about her. So this is a version of how we met. She doesn't even know this. Turn off the recorder. All right, cool. All right, Hollywood Africans. The only thing that was certain was that it was June, and we had split a pepperoni pizza between us. An ultraviolet light set the room, Basquiat channel surfing, looking for cartoons, while Icarus prodded the canvas to see if the image fit precisely to the frame. He was certain that someone had broken in. I'm getting set to coast towards the front door when the girl of my dreams walks in. Now, I have to make some lame excuse about how I'm off to the bodega and how to get some smokes and how I have a craving for meat. I'm bound by this habit. She just smiles, I smile back. Then a voice from the back of my throat says, "You can come with." Cut to me and her at a stop sign. Now, I don't want to play the right game the wrong way. In the silence that has followed us from the front of the door, I swat a crowd of mosquitoes above her head. There is no water, but I can smell the ocean. The man in the store is sweeping the street, and at which point I ask her name. I have only ever seen her in a gallery with a glass of Prosecco in her hand. I watch the man watching us in the long nights in that long summer. She pulls out some ice cream from the freezer and adds it to the bill. The pulp of her lips are flint and fire. The birds are silent, and so is the wind. And the rest of the night, it falls away. In another magic, she calls me by my original name. It's difficult to know what to walk away from. She asks why my eyebrows are raised. We are sitting on top of a park bench watching time. We are a part of it, right here in New York City. This is where the road delivers us to the edge of difference. Butterscotch drips from my fingers and falls to the tarmac, a beautiful suspension. Then I, or you, or whoever decides to look, hand rolls a cigarette as we rummage through our back pocket for a light. Thank you. All right, so this is one of the coolest geniuses I know. Sometimes she says some crazy things, but this is Karen McCarthy-Woolf. But she does, when it comes to poetry, she knows what she's talking about. She is the author of 3 poetry collections, a verse novel, Top Doll, which, if you don't know, has just been shortlisted for the TS Eliot Prize this year. She's the editor of 7 literary anthologies. In other words, she's making a difference. A Fulbright scholar, a fellow of the RSL, and her poems have been translated into Swedish, Spanish, Polish, Italian, Latvian, Croatian, Dutch, and exhibited poems on the underground. She probably translated them herself. Put your hands together for the genius that is Karen McCarthy-Woolf.
God, right, okay. I got genius points there, so I can get away with it or something. Right, wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you for the readings. And briefly, Natalie, Bernardine, thank you so much. Nats, for your guidance, unending patience, humour. And Bernardine, really just for being Bernardine. So thank you for that. Yeah, what did I want to say? Oh yes, I know what I wanted to say. I'm not going to talk about the experience of being on the complete works because the piece I'm going to read reflects that. It's an essay stroke poem, lyric essay, kind of in-betweeny thing. Neil, don't be alarmed, it's edited. Okay, I can see Neil's face, oh my God. And the thing is, it's kind of like, it's in this form called a suihitsu. It's an old Japanese form. It will become apparent. The only thing I was going to say is that it's actually really perfect for, like, you know when you start to drift off? It's like something, oh, yeah, la, 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 la. And you start drifting and you go, oh, right, okay. But actually, the suihitsu is completely built for that. So you can drift off and then you come back. And amazingly, Something's happened, but it doesn't matter, okay? So that's that. And then the other thing I wanted to say is that it's the 25th of October this evening, and it would have been my grandmother's 98th birthday. Yeah, and so I want to dedicate this to her. Yeah, Nick, yeah, oh my God, who's going to bring me a tissue? No, all right, hold on, it's okay, it's right, it's good. I'll just use the one Linton brought you, you just bring it back up. We'll all use it. Yeah, no, it would have been my nan's 98th, and I really want to honour her because I didn't know this until recently, but my sister told me when she was at school, she won the school essay prize. And I think my nan would have been a writer, but she was a working class girl a long time ago. You know, you can hear that 98. And she had to leave school at 14. So this is for her. It is lovely when diaspora poetics and the Zuihitsu. It is lovely when a fragment can become a whole. Kimiko Han. A Zuihitsu is a Japanese form that translates literally to running brush. Generous in its relationship to disrupted thought, it holds together with a through line that could be geographic, thematic, and quotidian. Its lexicon is the journal, the diary. Picture a little lock clasped over an embossed cover, a key on a satin cushion, which reaches back to its heritage text, Sai Shonagon's The Pillow Book, a 10th century classic by a woman written in colloquial, if courtly, Japanese, not classical Chinese, as was usual for literary works of the time. Lately, everything I write has a funeral in it, although I'm resisting now because I've written many elegies and I don't want to be defined by my relationship to death, although ultimately, who isn't? The Zuihitsu operates via juxtaposition, a little clang-clang between ideas or moments or items on a list. Last week, I went to my friend Jemima's mum's funeral, and the wake was in the garden of a large Georgian house by the River Thames, and a funeral is a significant thing, a global ritual that all cultures, even crows, share. So I've decided to mention it, which means I can now breathe out. A long time ago, once upon, I attended a workshop with Kwame Dawes as part of the Afro Style School, a precursor to the complete works, where he challenged the power dynamics of the metaphor and its little sibling, the simile, as the hegemonic literary device in poetry in English. This may have happened around a bonfire. Note the almost invisible metaphor, that little sibling. When my sister told me she had incurable esophageal cancer, I was on the phone in a large garden bordering a park, right at the beginning of lockdown, and I bent forward as she spoke as if I had been punched. Zach texts a link to a book, Breath, The New Science of a Lost Art. Its author, James Fenton, no, not James Fenton, he's a poet and a critic, James Nestor, says, by the law of averages, you will take 670 million breaths in your lifetime. When I did the Wim Hof breathing with Zach in his room, I hated it. I felt like I was going to die. Now I'm thinking about the relationship, etymologically, between the church spire, inspire, conspire, spirit and expire, and the poetic line. How lineation requires us to think about both image and breath. And music, of course, always music. Oh soul, I feel cold and unused to such space as breath and eternity around me. Toy Derricott. A poet whose writing is like a Zuihitsu, even when it's not a Zuihitsu, because of its intimate tone, because she's not afraid of the elevated lyric of autobiography or of being understood. Her clear communication is an important act of poetic vulnerability. Derricott says, joy is an act of resistance. I'm working towards that. 3 things I want to write about: my sister, sugar, sex. 3 things I don't want to write about: sugar, sex, any of my sisters. I often give these lists to my students as free writing prompts. Did I say that the Pillow Book is full of resonant lists? Lists that are in themselves poems. It is lovely when is a very Cy Shonigan type of phrase. It is lovely when I veer off and get back on track. It is lovely when I discover James Fenton was commissioned to write a poem about journalists who died in the cause of war reporting, to accompany a large glass sculpture called Breathing. M sends me a link to a lecture on the Zuihitsu by the Korean-American poet Eugenia Lee, also of hyphenated identity note, in which she describes it as curated randomness. No wonder more people are using the form these days. If social media is anything, isn't it that? Although, algorithmically speaking, it only feels random when mostly it's highly patterned, shaped, curated. When I came across Joy Harjo's work, the first time in the Poet's Notebook, an anthology which included her journal entries, I loved the relaxed voice and the exposed autobiographical detail in those notebook snippets. It is lovely when you get to know a writer through a snippet. There is something about that word, snippet. We break the line at times for emphasis. A line is a snippet. It is lovely when I think about how now I'm thinking about a diaspora poetics of illogical realms, how the experience of black and brown bodies is inevitably illogical because they must endure that most illogical thing, racism. In The Guardian, Roger Robinson says, poets can translate trauma into something people can face, and that poems are empathy machines. I like that he speaks about trauma as presence, as mutable, that he acknowledges the healing and transformative possibilities of articulation. I posted a picture of my little sister's dog, Spike, an imperial Shih Tzu, the kind Cy Shonigan might have had. Spike is waiting patiently in her room at the hospice. The light in that room was full of sun, the tilt of his head quizzical. Sunlight, very bright sunlight, flowers, sea, sky inspire me, and timelessness, daydreaming, lack of intention. Mimi Calvati lists these as some of the things that inspire her. Over lockdown, I read an essay called In Praise of Shadows by Kunichiro Tanizaki. It was only 66 pages long, but it took me forever to finish. Every night I read one page and fell asleep. Its sections were tantalizing, though. On construction, the toilet aesthetic, a different course, a novelist's daydreams, on paper, tin and dirt, bowls of broth, the enigma of shadows, and an uncanny silence, reflections in darkness, shadows on the stage, the woman of old, beauty in the dark, a world of shadows, a cool breeze in total darkness, final grumblings. Bowls of broth. I could keep on saying that. Sometimes we write because we like the sound of something. Single-mindedness is the exact opposite of what a Zuihitsu is, but conversely, in order for one to work, you sort of have to pursue that as an ideal. Bernardine Evaristo's creative memoir, Manifesto, is subtitled, On Never Giving Up. There have been times when I've almost given up. There was a time not long ago when gatekeepers made lists of words that poets couldn't, shouldn't write. Shard and mango were on this list. Admittedly, I never saw this list, but it existed, apparently. There was a time not long ago. My most vivid memory over lockdown was standing outside Bart's with a basket full of cold-pressed juices and looking up, and looking up, and the street was grey, and the hospital was grey, and the windows were grimy and distant, and my little sister was locked inside, and there wasn't much signal, and she was too ill and depressed to answer our texts, but she waved that day from the window, and I waved back from the pavement, and above me the wind whirled and sighed. Another word I like the sound of is gosling. I'm conscious that this section is a little nostalgic, and nostalgia is risky, but formally inherent. A historicity necessary as an act of witness. And all the sugar in Brazil can't bring my little sister back. Is this Suihitsu an empathy machine? And why don't I like the word machine? Roger Robinson upgrades William Carlos Williams's definition of a poem as a small or large machine made out of words. But empathy or not, why does it have to be a machine? Birdsong has no syntax. It has no grammar. It has no sentence structure. If you just allow yourself to listen to it, you don't know what's going to come out. Mona Arshi's bird poems are buried in the landscape in Norfolk, are in Punjabi, little sonic clusters. Maybe the Suihitsu is a bird, a surprising bird, rather than a machine. Breathe. The answer is breathe. When my little sister stopped breathing, we all exhaled briefly, almost imperceptibly, from relief at her release. I leapt forward to touch her while her body was still warm. I knew I didn't have long before she got cold and her skin hardened. You know these things only once you have cradled the dead, once you have encountered the body minus the soul. She always wore factor 50, and her face was virtually unlined. I remember touching her arms, her hands, saying her name over and over, saying her name. Thank you. I can't leave because I have to tell you something, and it's really, really important as the night ends. It's actually almost the most important moment of the whole night, and that is that we will be out there with the bar and the books in the bookshop with you. Thank you.